I'm Deverie Acuff, and I'm the Public Information Officer for the town of Truckee. We have a lot of topics that we'd like to cover with you today, so we're going to get started with that. Last time I sat down with Chief Leftwich, and we discussed about the governor's stay-at-home order, our community, the common questions and concerns that were being discussed on social media at that time. Today we wanted to focus more on business operations, and because of that, I wanted to introduce you to Denyelle Nishimori. She's our Community Development Director, and that involves businesses and code compliance. So Denyelle, we wanted to get your take on the next stage that we keep hearing about, and thank you for joining us. So let's get started. Chief, last time you broke down Governor Newsom's stay-at-home order for us, and I just mentioned the next stage of what's being called stage 2A and 2B. What is going on with the state order, and what is stage 2?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that sets the platform for really what we're going to be talking about, I think, today. Just to back up a little bit, so we're still under the governor's order from March. What he did more recently was develop a roadmap for reopening, and that's when we start talking about the stages 1 through 4. That's described within that roadmap. So up to very recently, we were at stage 1. Last Friday, we went to stage 2. But the confusing part for our community, and particularly business owners, is there's 2 components to stage 2. In Truckee, we've been calling those 2A and 2B because it just clearly defines it when trying to explain it. But there's 4 stages in total. The first one was really preparation. 2 is those low-risk businesses. The first part of that was curbside pickup, so that 2A was curbside pickup, but no really interior business was to be done. And then, of course, restaurants was dine out only. And with what the state is now calling as part of that roadmap, an attestation or a readiness criteria, really that's a fancy way of saying that the county by county in California has to provide for the state almost a readiness document to move into the 2B portion. And so the County of Nevada has done that. They did that last night. We were fortunate to get approval from the state. So we're in full stage 2. And I think we're going to talk about it more, but what that looks like is probably in Truckee, we're going to see some more restaurant activity. The third stage is going to be a little bit more difficult for us. That's high risk businesses. So that's the nail salons and the hair salons and things where I think the state's looking at as patrons and business owners being in close proximity for an extended duration of time. Proximity and duration are 2 things I hear them talk about a lot. So that's really stage 3, is those businesses that require proximity and duration, and we're being a little bit more conservative before we move into that stage. We're not there. And then stage 4, the state's describing as lifting the order completely, and there's a much more thorough list of requirements to be in place before that happens. But that's the gatherings, the large concert venues, where really all the restrictions have been lifted, probably outside of social distancing and some of the hygiene. But that's the roadmap that the state has laid out. We were at stage 2 last week, and now, stage 1 last week, and this week, as of last night, we're fortunate enough to be at full stage 2, 2A and 2B.
Danielle, what does stage 2B look like for our local businesses?
So our local businesses, some of them now will have the opportunity to open, but I would say this is not going to be a business as usual type situation, in part because there's going to be social distancing and hygiene requirements that we haven't seen kind of in pre-COVID times. So I think a lot of businesses are excited about the opportunity to be able to open, but also have some concern in a lot of ways that they're going to be able to open properly and make people comfortable, so not just themselves and their employees, but customers coming in. And so thankfully Nevada County has been working really hard on a lot of guidance for the businesses to better understand what that looks like for them, but it's really going to be sort of on a business by business level, where the business owners are going to kind of take a look at how they operate and how best they're going to be able to open. So new things that we'll see opening that we hadn't previously will be childcare centers. We'll have dine-in restaurants, so and not at full capacity. I think that's been kind of a common question of, if they get to open, what does that look like? There's still a lot of incentives and reasons to kind of move that activity outside. There'll be some services like dog grooming, kind of landscaping. We'll also have the ability for kind of car wash businesses, so things that are still low risk, but we can see this happen. And then offices, and again, that's still sort of not at a full capacity. So although we're moving into this next phase, it's sort of a soft reopening, I would say, really with the opportunity to kind of look at the community overall and see how we can do this safely and slowly so that we don't take a step backwards. Some of the things that the town is doing to help our businesses is we're looking at the opportunity to be able to move more activity outside. So in the past, the town has had a lot of regulations about what you can do with your business activity outside, and we've kind of said, really, this is an opportunity for us to just help facilitate the conversation with businesses and give them the chance to have the room that they need to operate safely. So for many of them, they're going to be able to have more dining outside. We're going to let people use their parking spaces. They're going to be able to have shade structures. They can do sales outside and a variety of things that they wouldn't normally have been. So the community is going to see a lot of different activity happening that they hadn't in the past. And I think that's a good thing with caution.
What data do we have from the business community on how they're doing?
So again, and we didn't really understand until we went out and talked to the businesses. So one of the first things that the town did is just had that conversation. So that was with focus groups, with surveys, so that we could really get a sense of what the business community was facing. And we have a lot of different industry sectors that we had to take a look at. So whether it was retail, sort of outdoor recreation, we looked at people who have offices. It's just a variety of things that we kind of tested. And I don't think it's any surprise that we got back results that showed that our businesses are struggling. Many of them had to lay off employees, had difficulty paying their leases, and just really had logistical issues with losing some of their supplies and things like that. So what we really wanted to do is get a sense of what the town could do to kind of help these businesses in these times moving forward. So that's where we've just started to look at our ability to be flexible, resources that we could provide, whether it was rental assistance to community members or working with other organizations to kind of help them. So I think many of them, again, are excited about the possibility of being able to open, but are cautious about what that looks like for them so that they can do it safely.
We hear a lot about aid and assistance to our business community. Have any local businesses been able to benefit from that?
Thankfully, yes. We've had a lot of businesses who have gone out looking for different opportunities to help support their activity. And in the survey results that we got back, we've understood that about 30% of our businesses were able to use the CARES Act support. And then we also have the Sierra Resilience Fund. So we have 7 businesses that have received money loans for that. And then we have another 41 Truckee specific businesses that are in process right now, with more in the region that are also applying. So those are just some of the more well-known things that are happening. But I would also say that businesses themselves are relying on each other more than they have in the past. We've seen a lot of owners being able to provide income to their employees just because they want to do the right thing and keep them going. Same with a lot of the property owners downtown and in other places who have decided not to charge their leases and other things. So I think this is really a recognition that the community is pulling together to support each other.
I think one of the things also that the focus group really pointed out to us is that each business has their own timeline and their own kind of challenges. And so the town's really doing whatever we can to put ourselves into a support role for them. And now that we've very quickly moved into this stage 2, I think we, meaning the town, has to be patient with individual businesses and really work on their timeline as to what they need to open back up or have their soft opening. I don't think there's one size that fits all. We really need to be flexible in that way as well.
We saw a press release last week canceling 4th of July events and Truckee Thursdays through July. Why was this decision made so early, and how can we be sure that we didn't make it too early?
Yeah, I covered that a little bit in my explanation about the roadmap and the stages. I think locally there was 2 factors that caused that to be canceled early on, particularly with 4th of July, and that was logistics. We have to be good partners to the other 4th of July fireworks celebrations that were happening in North Lake Tahoe and Incline. And when that event became a consideration for all those entities, we realized that as a group we need to make a decision, and we need to give people a fair amount of warning so that they can make summer plans or not make summer plans in this case. So a lot of it was logistics and being good community partners to the other entities around the lake. And I think the second was, and the reason we made that decision was that in Governor Newsom's roadmap, he clearly pointed to gatherings being stage 4. And stage 4, in his words, were months, not weeks away. And so we had a pretty clear picture that we likely were not going to be reaching the point where we could have that level of gatherings by July 4th. And so to try and accommodate the partners, realizing that those entities that were holding those events had a lot of logistics and planning around them, giving our community fair warning that that likely wasn't happen, and knowing it was going to be included in stage 4 was the reason we did it so early on.
What happens if we start to see another increase in positive COVID cases as restrictions are lifted and businesses open?
I would suspect that public health, or our county public health, would start to put some restrictions back in. Danielle actually mentioned this. I think it's one of the most critical points. We want to continue to take one step forward and not be the group that takes those 2 steps back. So I would think that public health is going to be monitoring that. One thing to be aware of is we are also increasing our testing capacity. So naturally, we're going to be testing more people. State of California is over 1 million people that have been tested for COVID now. So, and that's at a rate of about 30 to 35,000 tests a day. So obviously that's going to discover some more positive cases, people that are asymptomatic. We don't necessarily want to immediately respond to just the fact that we're getting more positive tests. I think we have to be cautious and still remember the initial plan was to flatten the curve and not overrun the hospitals. That's still a consideration, but the numbers are telling us that that's not as much of a concern as it was obviously back in March. So we do feel good about stage 2 and reopening, but we'll be closely communicating with public health, California State Public Health, and then of course Tahoe Forest Hospital District to really monitor what the cases and the testing we have that's going on, so that we don't make a mistake and then start to put ourselves in that 2-step back position.
We know that you communicate, as you just mentioned, with Tahoe Forest Hospital District officials very regularly. How is testing going, and how's the hospital doing? Yeah,
so the hospital is very healthy right now, which is a good thing for us. I don't think we'd be making a lot of these stage 2 considerations if the hospital was not in the position they're in. As of just earlier this week, we don't have any patients in the hospital with COVID, so our emergency beds and our ventilators and all the equipment that we need to properly take care of our community are available. And that's been a big hurdle for us to get past. So I've gotten very positive feedback from the hospital that we're in a good position with regards to COVID. We're not completely out of the woods. There's still reasons to maintain that social distancing and be very conservative about how we soft open, but we're in a healthy spot. And as I mentioned with the testing, data is really key here. We want those early warning systems. So seeing positive tests doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. We want to make sure that testing is showing us where our community is at with COVID, and the state has been helpful with that. We have some testing locations locally now, not only the Tahoe Forest, but in the county, down in West County and Grass Valley, and then of course we have one in Kings Beach that's for a regional area. So the sites are coming online, the availability of the test kits are coming online, and that's going to continue to provide us that really important data to make these intelligent decisions.
What is happening with enforcement in those businesses that might push this a little too far?
So I think the first thing to think about is really that this is going to be an education opportunity, that although the town does compliance when necessary, that usually is a conversation. So there's going to be many businesses who don't fully understand the regulations, aren't clear on what they should do for their own operations, and there's going to be some trial period for people to kind of figure out what that means. And I think this is an opportunity for the community to be patient with each other, with our businesses, as they work through this. So the town's role really is to look at that from an education perspective and work with the community to help them understand. And we all know that there's going to be different comfort levels with what is happening. So what someone may perceive as a difficulty in a business may just be their own personal discomfort. And those are the types of conversations that we'll have, is to ensure that people kind of look at that from an empathetic perspective and understand that this is challenging on all sides. It's going to be challenging for customers, challenging for businesses, and we're really in a role to help facilitate those conversations.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Danielle, if there is one thing that you want to communicate to our community as a whole, what would that be?
I thought about this quite a bit, and really we're a community of grit and perseverance. We've faced many challenges like this before. I know it wasn't COVID specific, but we've all been through those significant snowstorms. We've been through battles with wildfires, you name it, and this is really the time when the community tends to shine. We pull together and we support each other, and I think that's really where we need to look at this from. It goes to the chief's point about we want to take a step forward without taking those steps backward, and the way to do that is to be patient, to work with each other, and really think about this in terms of how this moves our community forward.
Well said.
Chief, you have asked our community to stay focused in several appearances. As we go into summer, what does staying focused look like now? What do you want our community doing?
Yeah, great question. So I think it's transitioned a bit. I mean, initially it was, I used the analogy of being in mile 15 of the marathon, and I want people to stay focused on flattening the curve. And I think in essence that curve has been flattened from overrunning the hospital, right? So now the focus has got to transition a little bit. And I think Denyelle said it great. I think I want people to stay focused on being patient with one another. There's still a lot of questions out there, whether that's face coverings or masks. I know that's going to be a very sensitive topic moving forward. There's no plan to make that mandated on the county or the state level that I know of at this point. But we need to be patient with one another, stay focused on your own social distancing, really use those proper hygiene habits. If you're comfortable with face coverings, use those. That's protecting the community in some ways. And for the business community, stay focused on trying to do the best you can to use the guidelines that the state and public health have put out so that you can continue to open and that we stay moving forward. But I think now, in general, that focus has turned to kind of that personal accountability and that patience level with businesses as they transition and with neighbors and visitors and the people we're going to start to see. I mean, a topic that routinely comes up is, now that we've moved to stage 2, are we putting ourselves into a position where we're going to get visitation? And technically, recreational visitation is still against the stay-at-home order from the state. We've talked about this at length. There's no way I can arrest my way out of that problem. I think it's inevitable. It does happen to some degree, but we need to continue to really focus on that social distancing, regardless of who the individual is, and having patience for our business community to try and handle that population that's coming in. I think that's a more realistic way to look at it.
Well, thank you. I think that covers most of the community questions. I appreciate your time this morning. And then as the questions and concerns change, would you guys be willing to sit down with me again to do this?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.